Hey folks, it's Joe from the Abyssal Lurkers, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my rig setup. So the Abyssal Lurkers is a one-man band. I play everything, record everything, write everything, mix and master everything. So I've collected, quite a few different instruments over the years, and I use them in varying forms when I'm recording. We'll start off with the one I use the most, which is my Jaguar Special. I went for the Special because honestly, it's just Jaguars are pricey, and the Special was not cheap, but it was cheaper than some of the really nice Jaguars. I knew that I wanted more of an all-purpose guitar, not something that I'd be afraid of like nicking or something like that. So that's why I went with the Special. I got some 12 gauge flat wounds on there. They're great for that classic surf sound, and I really like them for tremolo picking because there's less resistance. It just makes it a little bit easier to do. Not to sound lazy. Next up, we've got a Telecaster, and this is my oldest guitar. It's got to be early 90s Mexican Telecaster. This is the guitar that I used to teach myself to play the guitar. And in fact, if you look real closely, you can see there's some discoloration where I used to have like punk and ska band stickers on it, which is, I don't know if that's cool or really embarrassing, but I'll let you guys decide. It doesn't have the tremolo arm, which is a bummer because it's a Telecaster, but sometimes I'll cheat by pushing on the back of the neck to kind of get a similar kind of effect. And I also used it on a Disco Renegade when I was doing some of that like kind of funky rhythm guitar stuff. It's great for that. Next up in my collection, you just got a plain old Squier P bass, about as basic as it gets. I like using a pick on my bass because I'm not a real bass player. I'm a guitar player. It's on my list to learn finger picking, but just haven't gotten around to it yet. Thankfully, in surf, I can get away with some picked bass. So it's a great bass. It gets the job done. Classic for rock and roll. I don't own a bass amp. I actually just go through an amp simulator. I use Line 6 Pod Farm for all of my bass stuff, and it does a great job. So over here we've got my acoustic. It's a Epiphone acoustic. I think it says Gibson AJ there. I'm not really sure what that means. I'm not much of a gearhead. Maybe you guys do, but when I was learning guitar, I actually learned on electric, which I didn't realize at the time was weird. Most people learn on acoustic first. So then I didn't get this guitar until much later, but I really like it. I use it for, kind of like more of a Western flair. My two spaghetti Western tracks, you can hear it at the beginning. It mics up real nicely. We'll talk about how I mic it here in just a second. So I'm going to skip over this stuff for now. Talk about my last guitar, and we'll come back to the amp and the pedals. Gibson SG Special. This is the guitar that got me through all my punk band playing. I put in some Seymour Duncan Destroyers in, and it's a great guitar. I want to say it's late 90s, something like that. And I don't use it that much anymore, unfortunately, because it doesn't really have the sound that I want. But for more untraditional stuff, like one of my tracks, They Rise, the newest single, there's more of a kind of a grittiness to it, so you can hear it in the background there. I love SGs. They're like Les Pauls, but they're cheaper and lighter. Maybe one day I'll get a Les Paul, but not now. I got a Shure 57 classic mic. I use it, for almost anything. It's fantastic. And then what I like to use for the acoustic is this KSM 27. It was recommended to me many years ago when I was first getting into home recording, and it was recommended for vocals, which it does a great job of, but it does a nice job of capturing the airiness of an acoustic guitar. And then I've got an Oxygen MIDI controller that I use for any of the kind of like organ stuff that you hear on the recordings. Very basic, very small, almost looks like a toy, to be honest, but it does what it needs to do, so I'm happy with it. Okay, amp-wise, in my garage buried, I've got a Marshall half stack from my punk rock days, but haven't used that in a long time. Nowadays, I just use this twin reverb reissue. It's loud, it's very heavy. Kind of wish I'd gotten a deluxe instead because I like the sound of a deluxe and it's just easier to manage. But the twin reverb, is great. I like to use the onboard tremolo because it sounds good, but it still frees up my space on my pedal board. So you'll hear that on like the Spaghetti Western stuff, or there's a track called Agent Octo that I put out. You can hear it there a little faintly too. Reverb wise, I don't have, sadly, a traditional Fender reverb tank. But I do have a reverb tank from Surfy Bear, which is great. Surfy Bear is awesome. They are the next best thing. I didn't build my own. Some people do. I wish I could say I'm that handy, but I'm not. So I just went ahead and bought the whole thing. It's great. You can kick it. It's got the spring in there. It's awesome. Can't really have surf without that tank, right? So then my pedal board, I got a Voodoo Lab pedal board. And I bought it for the same reason that I bought the tank, because I'm not good at making stuff. So this is great. It's big enough to fit everything I need, but not so big that I'm one of those guys who's got like 30 pedals and I'm tripping all over them. So over on the right, we'll start on the right. Just got a plain old tuner, had it for decades. It's great. I love the the visual element of it. Next up, we got a Keeley compressor. I got this because I was just kind of like reading about what are some good compressors, and it was recommended to me by the internet. I just put it up front. I don't crank it too much. It gets rid of some of the inconsistency in strumming and the flabbiness that you can get from fast strumming. Then I've got an Ibanez tube screamer. If I want something to sound nice and sweet, I turn it off. If I want a little bit more grit, turn it on. The Echoplex is probably my favorite pedal that I own. I really don't use it as much as I'd like. It's got a really cool East Bay Ray, Dead Kennedys kind of sound to it that you can get out of it. I'm still figuring out a way to incorporate that into my sound. Sometimes I'll turn it on with a much shorter sustain than East Bay Ray just to kind of thicken the sound a bit. And then the vibrato pedal from Behringer, honestly, it's great, sounds great. I don't use it much. In fact, I've never used it on a recording. I like tremolo generally more, but one of these days we'll get it in there because I really do like the sound. And then last but not least, I have a very basic home studio. Just got some KRK speakers, monitor speakers, and I've got an Onyx producer that I plug into, whether I'm miking up or going in direct. And then I like to use isotope neutron, isotope ozone to do my mixing and my mastering. So that's about it. As you can see, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, nothing too surprising. And thanks for watching.